Hey, how's it going?
Hey Ryan, it's going well. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good to have you back. And I know for today's recording and conversation, you had some things that you wanted to
Yeah,
show us and share. So I'll kind of let you tell us what that is.
sure thing. So while at GTC, I tried to go around and look at the booth and figure out what was going on. I did pick up a couple t-shirts, and I think they're called eye masks to help you sleep kind of thing. I went to the Codium booth, and Codium make an editor called Windsurf. And I figured today, I've used Windsurf a little bit, full disclosure, but I haven't really dug into it. Most of the time, I'm using either VS Code or, oh man, this is my brain here, or Cursor. But between those two, and they're honestly the same engine, so they have a lot of look and feel that's similar, but Windsurf itself is a little bit different. So I'm going to start as if I'm starting fresh here on a Linux PC. But basically, all I'm doing is looking for a Windsurf, grabbing the download options, and we'll get started. So the reason I'm looking at this is that the question is there a better way of working or a different way of working and another editor that might be different? And I think Windsurf has a couple wrinkles that are different than Cursor, and Cursor is definitely different than VS Code. But I think there's a couple modalities here that might be interesting. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go and grab this. Oh, shoot. Sorry. I, of course, went to Mac instead of Linux. Give me 1 second here. We'll try this. There we go. But I think the ways of working might be interesting in terms of different modalities. Like when you're talking to an LLM, and I hate to personify it here, but basically when you're doing that, how do we say it? Like virtuous cycle, basically, as you're trying to develop. Some people call it vibe coding or vibe driven development. There are different ways of doing that. So some of that could be tab completion, some of that could be chat, some of it could be like self driven, or I think in Cursor you might call it like YOLO mode. And then what we'll do is go through a little bit of that here.
It's definitely how I feel when I'm just like shoving code in there.
Yeah,
Don't really know what it's going to do. We only do that with really low impact projects.
you got it.
It's not something you're going to do in
You got it.
production.
Yeah. So full disclosure here. What I'm normally working on are little test projects in order to show something in like a dev environment or a staging environment, or maybe even prior to that, we could call it like ideation or brainstorming or something like that. But a lot of times I'm just trying to figure out if an idea can work or if it's workable, if it's something that we should look into, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Also, I'm
proof of
noticing with a
concept.
lot of these. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say it's a proof of concept.
Absolutely. And I'm noticing with a lot of these cogen tools, there are some things on the back end. We'll call them maybe governance kind of stuff. I know it's not exciting, but maybe the security of the packages that come out that are being used, the versions, that kind of thing, or maybe even licensing can be a little bit interesting. So I'm getting into those kind of conversations when being the quote unquote product manager of some of these things that I'm inventing. But I've got a PRD here that I should be able to pop in and we can try to pretend we're building an app. But basically, it looks like it's installed at this point in time. So if I just type in Windsurf, we'll see if we can pull it open. Full disclosure, I'm on a lower res monitor here just to make sure the recording quality is good. But hopefully you can read everything that I've got on screen here. Okay, similar to Cursor, you can import from VS Code. And this is interesting because if you've got plugins and things like that, I think it'll grab some of that stuff or try to. The other thing that we'll do is if you've got any, I'm trying to like key bindings, that kind of stuff, my understanding is we'll bring that in. But we're going to start fresh without anything fancy. You'll notice here that there is a checkbox to add it to the path. So in case you want to do like Windsurf space text file, that kind of thing, you can do it. The other is, as I mentioned, VS Code versus Vim. If you've started fresh and you want to go into Vim bindings, you can do. I know this isn't important. I just feel like it actually is neat to me to see a newer editor with old school key bindings. So they're not trying to get rid of the old. It's bring your own workflow, but let's add some stuff to it. Now, the other thing I liked about this, and this is just again, it's like a sidebar, but I really like the fact that they have Tokyo Night in here, which happens to be my favorite color scheme, but it's also not very popular. So I was really happy to see it here. Or maybe it is and I didn't know, but I find this one a little bit easier on the eyes for me. All right. And then for here, now there is a sign up or login to use the AI features. I'm going to quickly sign up. Oops. So all I'm doing in another window is authorizing with GitHub. And then I'm trying to sign in. There we go. Now, I'm using a free account, so I've got a certain amount of tokens to use, that kind of thing. I don't use this very often, so I should have quite a few to do. Okay, yeah, so you can see there's already some warnings here about the free plan, just in terms of writing, that kind of stuff. We can sign up for a full all singing, all dancing thing here, but I think most of what I'd like to talk about is being able to set up a quick project, which is what we're going to do here. And then we're going to pipe in a PRD. And I think I can do that here. Let's see if that works. There we go. So all I did, sorry, I went a little bit faster. So I created a folder And then because we added Windsurf to the path previously, all I did was move into the folder, so CD folder name, and then I just typed Windsurf space dot, dot meaning here, that folder, and then all it did was just open it up there. Now again, there's some red on the screen, that kind of stuff, telling you that I haven't signed up for anything here. What we're going to do is go into chat mode, and we're going to keep Cascade, which is the base model that it uses. And I know that sounds awful. It's actually not that bad. I've used Cascade quite a bit, like when you run out of credits, that kind of stuff. But what I want to start with is it looks like VS Code. Like nothing in here is very different. There's a few things in here that might be a little bit different than Cursor in terms of the way it works. So like the terminal, that kind of stuff. And again, this is a lower res, so things look a little bit crowded. But some of what I thought were interesting in Windsurf were things like, let's just create a new text file. I'm not sure if you can read this at the top. Is this legible? Is this font a little bit dark? Okay,
yeah,
good
that's
stuff.
good.
So it's telling me to select the language, fill in with the template, or fill in a different color. So I'm just going to click select the language here. And all I'm going to do is pick Python. And all that does is prompt the editor that this should be in Python code. So all I'm going to do is type in import. And now listen, I haven't typed anything other than IMPO, so it knows it's Python. It knows there's an import statement. But I really find the fact that it's like recommending that I use pandas from the start is interesting to me. It's just, I find this whole thing wild, I guess, as a beginner, is that a lot of times when I go to start a project, if I've primed the project properly, add a README, that kind of stuff, without going into chat mode or without going into brainstorming mode, I can already start typing. And a lot of the times I can boilerplate out a quick set of scaffold of what I want to do just by typing. And it feels like, I'm not sure if you've ever used IntelliSense and Visual Studio before, and Visual Studio Code has it as well, but it feels like that, maybe not on steroids, but like plus. It's like a little bit different than you'd normally expect. Okay, so
I think that that in general kind of explains what, to me, a lot of these tools are doing to help a lot of junior people, or even folks like us who just don't write production code all the time. So remembering syntax and all these things, like it's a muscle. If you don't use it very often, it atrophies. And which is another argument about AI too. But I think the main thing is that we know that for really basic things, like maybe just starting a new Python project, there's numbers that tell us like how often somebody might want to import a pandas package to do something, right? It's a very popular package. And the same way with IntelliSense is there's only so many routes, there's only so many things that you could possibly need based on what you've already put in.
Right.
And it's not even, I feel like that's just something we've been comfortable with for a long time. And a lot of the AI tools are just like the next phase of that, it feels like, the more I use them.
Absolutely. And for this, like I mentioned it before, it feels the role that I have is different. So I feel like I'm no longer a developer, or I guess in the past I'd be like a data engineer, DevOps. Engineer is a terrible term, but that was the title I had. And it feels more like a program manager or product manager, or sometimes like a product marketing manager. So what I'm going to do is paste in a PRD. So I think that's a project definition is what it stands for. So this is it here. And I had made this before. I've used this in a few other apps. We've talked a few times about different ways that we may be testing models or what we want to do. But this one, this is a limitation of Cascade in that the context window isn't long enough, but it's good enough. So like, where would I start with this PRD? And then what it's got is this context in here is part of this. So it should actually pull it in automatically because it's in the window, though in Cursor things work a little bit differently. Oh, there we go. Yeah, fair enough. It says it does not have it. So we're going to drag this into here.
Yeah, I found in Cursor that I do have to double check every once in a while that I've got the context set up right. Otherwise, I'm realizing, wait, you don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. We're not even sharing. We're not talking about the same thing. That's
interesting. Speaking of, here we are with a couple problems. So I'm just going to paste this in. Again, it's a long context window. But all this to say is that things work a little bit differently than they do in Cursor. It's not to say it's better or worse, but it definitely works differently. You can see how it wants to start. So it's what are the big steps to start with? Now, I did this a little bit differently than I might in Cursor because I wanted this plan. Now, that's not to say Cursor won't do this too, but I found that this seems to work a little bit better
Okay.
In Cascade, which is again a smaller model. I think if you're using with Sonnet 3.7 reasoning, it actually like these kind of steps are less required. Also, the context window in Cascade is smaller, not only for the one that I just pasted in, but as we're going through this conversation, it gets worse and worse. So we can ask things like, would I use LangChain or LangGraph? And these are more like generic kind of questions. I guess what I'm trying to say is some of the architecture stuff is what I find I get a lot of use from in this editor as opposed to Cursor. And it could just be that I'm holding it wrong. Do you know what I mean? The ergonomics are just a little bit different. But I found that this kind of stuff is pretty handy. Now, I mentioned LangChain and LangGraph. It's mostly because I'm playing around with trying to create agents and what those look like. These are popular frameworks that are similar, but not the same. And depending on the cutoff window of your model, they may get something like this wrong. In fact, some of the older models would get, like Llama 2, for example, we get this wrong a lot of the times, just because these are newer frameworks. But I think Cascade's actually pretty recent. It feels like last year in fall is where it kind of cut off, which is important. That cutoff date is pretty key when you're actually dealing with code or dealing with models to make sure that what you're using is relatively recent, at least in terms of those, again, those package versions or the licensing. But that's basically it. So we're in chat mode right now, but there's also a few other modes we can use. So there's chat mode. You can also ask questions of your code, very similar to something like Cursor. You can open with Cascade. The other thing you can do, if I grab this, is sometimes you get this little light bulb, which is actually pretty interesting. I find these pretty handy as well as you're going through. It's just, again, a different way of working with it. But you can actually go through and use these hints in similar fashion to Cursor. But the main thing I want to say is that the different context modes actually help quite a bit. And it feels to me like just a different way of using things. But importantly, Cascade itself is actually really powerful as a free tool. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that sometimes I end up using both Cursor and Windsurf, which sounds ridiculous. But imagine that you've got two interns instead of one. You've pitted them against each other without them knowing it. So I used to work at Samsung, and Samsung developed with, I think it was a Moscow University, a method called Triz. Triz is a way for me to give, say, you, Jason, a task, and maybe my model a task. And then I'll compare and contrast the results and then get you both to work on the one that I like, stealing the ideas from the one that I didn't necessarily pick, which is, it's pretty devious if you're a human in this kind of thing because you end up working on somebody else's project. And it could be like a year. In my case, it was like a year and a half later, I realized that there were two other teams working on the same thing. Then we all had to work together. But if this is an AI or Gen AI intern, no feelings will be hurt in this, I don't think. But that's the method that I've been taking. It's like using two of these products together and then combining the results of what I've got to get something a little bit better. And a lot of the times, let's pretend you're a staff engineer. How would you make this better? Let's pretend that you're a senior architect. What am I missing? Or you're a security engineer. What would that lens look like? Those kind of roles or personas, I guess, is what I'm generally trying to do. Because a lot of it is just the getting started part. I don't care too much about the code. I hate to say. It's more about, since I'm using it as an example, how can I change the structure? What would improve security? Those kind of things. What would the outcome? How could the outcome be better?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where the outcome is really what you're after. And like we can code things if we'd like, and if you enjoy coding, that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, whatever we identify as, it's not necessarily, or at least I don't identify as a coder. Like I'm a builder. I'm an engineer of some kind. Like I just want to create. And for a long time, up until recently, like that required deep knowledge and recall of information to be able to do that. And now these tools allow us to level the playing field for those of us who just aren't always steeped in the syntax and can just write something from scratch. That doesn't mean that we can't get an idea out of our heads and see it go from there, and probably have to go deeper and get more expertise and people involved to make sure that the code is high quality, it's got tests, all that kind of stuff. But I think the initial phase, that's what I was saying, like proof of concept, like it's been really good at just getting us from A to B. If, like you said, like I don't necessarily care about the code right now. I'm just trying to get something built, and then we can circle back, I think, in another conversation. So,
You got it. Yeah. So I don't know if you watch a lot of Mimi, YouTube, that kind of thing, but I just ran into a pretty funny problem with Windsurf is that it doesn't auto save. And in this case, it was an untitled file, so it's totally fine. You probably caught it as I was doing it in the first place. But one of the common quote unquote AI engineer questions is what does a circle mean in Windsurf? Which is you're brand new to an editor, you've never used an editor before, and they don't understand like that it means that you need to save your file kind of thing. And in this case, one of the errors I was getting back from the model from Cascade was that it couldn't update the file because it didn't have the path, which is fair because I just drug in the context or the content, that kind of thing. But this is maybe a key difference that I found in Cursor is that this kind of problem generally doesn't happen. It does seem to be Windsurf specific, but in some cases you may need to save your file before you go ahead.
Yeah.
It's very basic, but in case you're getting used to Windsurf or you're brand
Well,
new
you
to
know, all
these.
of them already feel like VS Code, right? So I think there's going to
Absolutely.
be this continued consolidation on just functionality. Like if
It
we
feels like
expect it to auto save, we expect it to do a thing, like they'll just all come together on that.
You got it. Yeah. And then my
So it looks
scrolling-
like it's
Yep,
looked
go
at.
ahead.
It's looked at your, what do they call them? The product or planning resource doc is what PRD stands for.
I think that is
I was trying to read
product
back through the.
requirements doc.
Product requirements
I
doc,
literally
you're right.
lazy Googled it. Sorry.
No, I think it said it right there in the feedback in the output from
Gotcha.
Cascade. So it looks like it's made sense of what you've given it.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And you can see, so basically what we asked was, hey, should I use LangChain or LangGraph? I happen to know the answer. The answer was LangChain. And I said, hey, update the PRD with LangChain because I had forgotten about it. It should be really important. And all we're doing is a chat interface, so a chat UI. There seem to be companies built around just making a chat UI these days and like what buttons you should include. Should you count tokens or give cost or both, that kind of thing. So it's a pretty common problem. But there are different frameworks that can help you work with this better or worse. Hopefully, in another episode, I'll talk more about LangGraph. But I think the main thing is that you're going through this iteration of what it should look like beforehand. And maybe this is something that like is ingrained in me in from school, or maybe it's something that I learned through test-driven development, but it's like having a plan before you start. Full disclosure, again, I think I said that 3 times. Generally, I will start just by typing in imports and figuring things out. Compiling, running, going through like just error-based kind of development is how personally I code. In school, though, I was taught to actually come up with a plan, mock out, stub what you can, that kind of thing, like the entire structure, and then go and try compile. And a lot of this was because I was learning Java at the time, and compiling Java at the time could take maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes kind of thing. We're talking about Pentium 2, Pentium 3 era, like a long, long time ago. These days, not as complex, not as important. And I feel like a lot of people are just throwing spaghetti at the wall, so to speak. So you're just trying to figure out, does this work? No? Okay, try this, try that kind of thing. As we're getting into this new type of programming paradigm, it feels like that's been accelerated. So people are really trying a whole bunch of stuff, getting AI to help, that kind of thing. I guess what I'm noticing is that if you step back and actually define things, the quality of what you're getting out from the model is actually a lot higher. You may run out of context or you may run out of tokens quicker. But if the goal is to have better code in the end or to spend less time trying to create code that works, this seems to be the happy path. And
Yeah.
I guess what I found in Windsurf in particular is that I can get a lot done with Cascade for free prior to moving up to Sonnet 3.7 or Sonnet 3.7 reasoning. I don't know about you, but those seem to be the best for me. Still yet to try Claude Code. I probably end up paying Anthropic at some point in time, but it really is like usable code for me. Like it's at the level where I think I can understand the code as well as, I'm not going to say I could write it from scratch, but I could get pretty close by going through the docs and doing it.
Yeah, 1000% agree. That's been my exact experience. I think I even shared in one of our previous recordings around how I came to, I think it was one of the first experiences I had with Cursor. I was doing some updates to my website, my personal website, and I just came to it with a bulleted list of 11 things I want to do that I'd already thought out, and I was pretty specific on what I wanted it to do, even which what my stack should look like. I was like, use Tailwind for CSS, use JavaScript, or not just JavaScript, but React for the front end. But once I got real specific, it got just way better. Like the whole project just seemed to get dialed in. And I think that's been a theme for everything that I do. In fact, putting more time and effort into like docs, like what you're sharing, even if it's not like a PRD or whatever, but just like thinking through what you're trying to do is worth the time. Like to spend 5 minutes doing that or 10 minutes or whatever will save you probably hours later trying to unwind something because we can go into this in another thing because I've got other thoughts about the attention span of these things. They seem to be limited, or I don't know, not as long as mine. But anyway,
Totally agree.
I don't want to get off track here. What you're sharing?
No, you're good. I'm done. I just wanted to give you a couple teasers in here as well. Listen, a lot of these editors are very similar. This one's got a couple different modes, that kind of thing. One thing that I'm noticing is becoming more and more prevalent is we talked a lot about agents for a bit, and then maybe prior to that was tool use. And these days, MCP seems to be the biggest thing. So I think it's Model Context Protocol is what it stands for, but imagine it as like an API for products or tools out there that you can use. So assuming that there's like an action list of things that you can do. So similar to maybe a CRUD app, but it might be something like look something up in Google Maps, or if it's a Datadog thing, maybe pull up the actual graph for something I've just deployed. Now, it's early days for a lot of these editors, even though MCP, I think, was announced in November last year from Anthropic, speaking of which. So a lot of times what you have to do is there's no real GUI, there's just a config file. So I'm going to show what that looks like here just quickly. So generally what you want to do is create a new file. So I'm going to create, I think this should exist, but just going to make sure that there's a Codium directory first. There is, in fact. And now all we're going to do is inside of Codium, which is right here. Oh, my apologies. What we're going to do is create a Windsurf MCP JSON file. So it's MCP, and this is manual, mcpconfig.json. And what this will allow us to do is actually go in here and define MCP servers, basically. Oh, shoot. You saw me being lazy here. I did something wrong. I'm not sure if you caught...
I thought you like threw a new trick at me that I didn't know.
No, and I'm also using a Japanese keyboard instead of English here. So hold on one second, because escaping Vim when you're in the wrong keyboard.
Yeah, that's a whole new challenge I've never experienced. Oh, that's not true. That's not true. I have actually run into that.
There we go. In case you ever get stuck in Vim and you're on the wrong keyboard layout, Shift ZZ or Shift ZZ will get you out of there. That's what I just did.
Good to know.
But yeah, the problem was I did bang without remembering that I had something else in there. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is paste in an MCP file, and we can talk about what this looks like. In here, what this is going to do is set up an MCP server called Google Maps, and the command to run it is to run npx, which is essentially a way to run this quick MCP server. The argument it's going to give you is this for Model Context Protocol, and it's going to ask for this key. Now, this could be in your environment, or you could already define it. In here, they've got to hard code it. You're not going to want to do that. All I'm doing here is, oops, if I can save. This is the beauty of, yeah, amazing. Oh my, this is awful. Sorry, I'm in the wrong keyboard layout. We'll do this again in Nano. This is the...
You're in... Vim is already hard. You're in like hard mode for Vim.
Hard mode? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just quickly do this in Nano. Okay, it did in fact save. I just couldn't see at the bottom. Everything else looks okay. Fantastic. And then in Windsurf, we should actually be able to go into the settings. Oh man, this is totally different. Right here, and advanced, and we have MCP in here. Oh, it's not in there yet. I might need to reload it, but basically what you can do is you can load in the MCP server and then add action. So imagine every time I brought in like something with geo coordinates, I could pull it up on Google Maps and maybe include a preview in a README file, that kind of thing, or other actions. Again, half-baked, but what I'd like to do in another session is go through some MCP server examples that will apply to multiple code editors, be it VS Code, be it IntelliJ, be it what have you. So to be able to bring these in. Sorry, half-baked demo tacked on to the end here, but I feel like when you're going through this process, this is also common across quite a few, and MCP is one of those things that's pretty popular these days. But yeah, I should probably stop now before I dig myself another hole.
Yeah, we definitely need to spend some time exploring and sharing stuff around MCP because even though, like you said, it was first brought up from Anthropic late last year, it seems like here since, I don't know, February or so, people are really starting to put out some interesting open source MCPs. We got a VS Code plugin for Datadog, and it's got some really interesting things in there that people have been showing us. It's on my list that I think we need to like escalate to the top and just get our hands on and understand some of this MCP stuff because, yeah,
Yeah,
people are
totally
asking.
agree. There's a ton out there. If you're more on the ops side, like I am, the thing that immediately caught my attention was that there's an MCP for Kubernetes. So imagine you're working with a dev Kubernetes box. You need to like deploy pods and do things like that as part of what you're writing. It's actually really cool. There's things like Spotify if you just want to have maybe create playlists or that are related, maybe in a kind of Pandora-esque fashion. Like, what are these? Maybe across genres, find me things with certain BPM, that kind of thing. Things like to-do managers, that kind of thing. So instead of writing your own to-do app, maybe you're writing like a front end for an MCP that's got a to-do in the background, which is pretty handy as well. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting way of grabbing, just like with REST APIs, grabbing from multiple sources and mashing them together in order to come up with something novel. This seems to be where we're at, but instead of us making the decision at design time, it's something where you can add in an LLM to grab from as needed, which is scary in the non-deterministic fashion, but also really interesting on the other side in terms of like novel ideas that you might not come up with.
Yeah. So when it comes to Windsurf, is it a tool you're going to choose over, say, Cursor?
I think so. And the worst part about this is that I may end up paying for both, as well as Anthropic on the top, which sounds like a lot of money to waste. So I've got to pick between one of the two or one of the three. The problem that I've got right now is that there's many ways of editing code, but they all don't feel the same in terms of ergonomics. So VS Code's pretty good. And I think the change from Copilot chat being just that little chat window as opposed to something that feels a bit more agentic to me, so it can create files, edit files, that kind of stuff, way more interesting to me than just copying and pasting back and forth or just talking to a chatbot. The other is, and as you demonstrated, Claude Code is very powerful and to me might redefine the way that I think about an editor, which I find very interesting. The
Yep.
other is that we're starting to add plugins into existing IDEs. And I get that VS Code's kind of like that as well, but we're talking about like the IntelliJ's or the proper Visual Studio, maybe even Xcode extensions at this point in time. That to me feels like bolt-on solutions compared to, we'll say, quote unquote, newer editors or editors that have been forked from VS Code from the ground up, kind of like Windsurf and Cursor. And then you've got the new paradigm. So the Claude Code to me feels like a completely different beast. And I don't know if one's better than the other right now, but I do feel like using two is really powerful actually going in between. And it could just be two models would actually help, but it seems like there's different ways that different editors will work that are better for me. So for example, like writing text, I find Notion is pretty handy for me writing text because it will grab that whole workspace as a context. But Google Docs also have some Gen AI capabilities as well. So it depends on the tool that you're using or where you spend most of your day. But it feels to me that it's probably two of those three is what I'm going to end up picking, which is sad.
Yeah, I don't know if it's sad. I think that's my experience too. What
Okay.
what I'm realizing is I'm bouncing around between several different tools, and part of it's because I'm trying to experiment and just
True.
try out different things and see how they work. The other part is when I'm legitimately working on a project, like I've been putting together this telemetry thing for, I tell you about that, the iRacing stuff I do or have done. I've built this little app where I can take my telemetry file and actually visualize it. And of course, Claude helped me build all of that.
Right.
But it wasn't just Claude. It was, or when I say Claude, like that's not very specific, but Claude
Right.
Code, I think, is where I started things. Then I moved over into Cursor. And even within Cursor, I bounced back and forth between a few different models. There's Gemini 2.5 in there now, so I tried that out for a little
It's
bit.
pretty powerful, yeah.
Yeah, it did great. And then I still have Warp, which I've popped into a little bit less there just because I'm really enjoying Claude Code.
Right.
Now I've seen Windsurf, and I think I need to go jump over there. I guess what I'm going with this is all of them have been necessary for me to be successful. There's been times where I just felt like Claude Code lost the plot, got bored, something. It just wasn't doing what we had started off doing.
Right.
And so I took a break, came back, and decided to load everything up in Cursor using Claude Sonnet, and I had another nice little 30 to 45 minute session, and then things shifted again in terms of, wait a second, now that's not what we were just working on 5 minutes ago. So I'm starting to feel this, I don't know, like attention span thing is what it feels like to me. But I'm also feeling like I'm laundering my code. Like I'm running it through so many different LLMs that there is no like source necessarily. It's a team effort between me asking questions and giving instructions and having a conversation. and then passing all that through a few different tools and models, and then at the end of the day, usually having something that works and being like, that was like, I couldn't have done that in an hour
Right.
previously. So anyway, thinking out loud, but that's code laundering. I don't know if that's a term or not, but that's the way it feels to me.
You heard it here, folks. Now, does it feel like it's generally that half an hour to an hour kind of time frame? Because that's where I'm at as well, actually. Is that if
Yeah.
something about the context window seems to not stop, but like degrade after that time. Sometimes I can just start a new session. It'll be totally fine.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have to prime it a little bit. A lot of times I will end up trying another IDE at that point in time where I probably don't need a different IDE. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll actually start from scratch as well. So after half an hour, you haven't really built much generally. And sometimes starting from scratch in like a different folder or a subfolder or like a different version can help me. But I do find maybe more interesting than the code that's being output is I do find that a lot of my assumptions about what I want to build will change halfway through. And then I realize this whole session actually is garbage because I started with an assumption that was incorrect. And I guess that's what I was trying to show in Windsurf is like I've gotten to that PRD because I've gone through this quite a few times. But it does look like sometimes it's more of an assumption on my end that I should be using TypeScript or something like that. Whereas that's not the case. Maybe we could have used Rust or what have you. But because I'm starting with the wrong assumption, generally the models won't say you shouldn't write this in Java. This should be in Python. Like they'll
Yeah.
continue down. Sir, yes, sir. That's a moving forward thing. Take that as a given. It's definitely got to be in Java or like whatever Scala language that you started off in, kind of thing. Whereas honestly, it could have been better in any other language.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm becoming a little bit more educated on just like, I need to help make some decisions that are a little
Right.
bit higher level, because if I just
Right.
leave it to the model to decide on things, that's sometimes it gets it right and I'm impressed, especially with Sonnet 3.7. Other times I'm like, no, that's not what we're going to do here. And I can see some people being like, oh, sure, sounds good, go for it. And it leads them astray down a path of writing code, and at the end of the day, it doesn't work. Or it's actually harmful. It's like a security
Right.
exploit or something that they've unleashed. So I'm also kind of wrestling, I guess, with some of that too. There's some really great articles I've read this week. I'm going to share them. I mentioned in our pre-call
Right.
that I'm going to share some links to some stuff that has gotten me really thinking lately. And I think on our website somewhere, I'm going to add maybe like just a page full of links that things that we've read and want to share.
Resources, what have
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. There's a every morning, not every morning, most mornings, I'll spend some time kind of reading and watching videos and stuff. And I always have things I've bookmarked and saved. And I feel like might as well just put that someplace where we can share it with everybody. So,
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's an invaluable resource, especially things since things are changing on a regular basis.
yeah, very fast. We did a brown bag internally,
Mhm.
you and I, and to talk about this project actually. And one of the comments I made in the slides is that things are just moving fast in general, especially for us developers or us technical people who are dealing with systems and building and maintaining stuff, whatever label you're using. And so what it means to be a quote developer is changing very quickly, which means that for us, what it means to be a developer advocate is changing very quickly. What it
Mm.
means to just be in this space, I think in general, is changing rapidly, and we should probably have an idea of what's changing so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like I've missed the bus or I'm missing the bus, or maybe I got on the bus and then got kicked off or something. But things are changing really quickly. Maybe I'm on the wrong bus. That could be the actual problem. But when I talk to developers who are just out of school, fresh, that kind of thing, most, if not all, are using some form of Gen AI. And a lot of the times they might be using something that I've never heard of, which is a weird space for me to be in. As someone who maybe I consider myself as well educated in the space, I feel like I'm in the unknown, or like I'm trailblazing or something like that. And as a dev advocate, it feels weird to not have that shared context. So to me, it feels like a lot of catch up.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a fire hose, and I think I acknowledge it as a fire hose, and that it's impossible to consume it all. But we'll step in and see what we can catch and
Absolutely.
make sense of. All right, I just noticed the time, so we should probably wrap things up here. But thanks for giving us a little demo
Of course, sorry, that
on.
was short and sweet, but basically very similar to Cursor, a little bit different, and you can get a lot for free.
Yeah, awesome, cool, and we'll figure out a game plan for talking about MCP here real soon. And
Yes, I have quite a few exciting examples that if I can get working, we'll make great demos. I'll work on the getting working part.
Awesome. Cool. As always, if you're watching this video, reach out to us if you've got any questions or feedback or suggestions on things that we should cover and talk about. This is a project that we are doing for ourselves to just stay on top of things, but also want to help whoever may be watching. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, I think we can just say goodbye, and we'll see you at the next one.